Corporal Jake Martinez wiped alien blood from his combat knife, surveying the carnage around him. The Nexus Station's docking bay looked like a slaughterhouse, which, considering the circumstances, wasn't far from the truth. Purple ichor, stained, the metal floors where the Vorthak raiders had made their last stand. That's the last of them, he muttered into his comm, stepping over a particularly large alien corpse. The thing had forearms and mandibles that could snap a human in half, but it hadn't been fast enough to dodge human reflexes in good old-fashioned earth steel. Behind him, soft footsteps echoed against the metallic flooring. Jake spun around, weapon ready, then froze. Standing in the shadows of a damaged cargo container was a woman, or something that looked remarkably like one. She was tall and pale, with midnight black hair that seemed to absorb the station's emergency lighting. Her eyes glowed a subtle crimson in the dim light, and when she smiled, Jake caught the unmistakable glint of fangs. "Well," she said in accented galactic standard. That was quite a performance. Jake kept his weapon lowered but ready. In 3 years of fighting in Diao, the Outer Rim conflicts, he'd learned that appearances could be deceiving, especially when those appearances involved glowing eyes and fangs. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, falling back on his military training. "The station's been compromised. We need to get you to the evacuation shuttles." The woman laughed, a sound like silver bells mixed with distant thunder. "Evacuation? Oh, human, you misunderstand the situation entirely." She stepped into the light, and Jake could see she wore what looked like a modified military uniform, though the material seemed to shift and flow like liquid shadow. "The name's Martinez," Jake said, relaxing slightly. If she was talking, she probably wasn't about to rip his throat out. Probably. "Corporal Jake Martinez, Earth Defense Corps. And you are?" "Valdris Nix," she replied, extending a pale hand. "Recently. Promoted, you might say." Jake stared at the offered hand for a moment, then made a decision that would be talked about in military academies for centuries to come. Instead of shaking her hand, he balled his fist and extended it toward her. "Fist bump?" he offered with a grin. Valdris tilted her head, confusion flickering across her aristocratic features. "I'm unfamiliar with this gesture." "It's an Earth thing," Jake explained, still holding his fist out. "You make a fist, I make a fist, we bump 'em together. Shows respect between warriors. I saw you take down 3 Vorthak back there while I was dealing with the big guy. That was some pretty impressive fighting." Valdris stared at his extended fist for a long moment, something unreadable passing across her face. Slowly, almost reverently, she formed her own pale fist and bumped it against his knuckles. The contact sent a small shock through both of them. Not painful, but definitely noticeable. "Huh," Jake said, shaking his hand. "Static buildup from the station's damaged systems, probably." What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that he had just performed an ancient ritual of the Sanguis courts. The touching of closed fists between warriors was how vampire nobility acknowledged equals in battle. For someone of Valdris's newly elevated status, it was the highest honor she could receive. "Tell me, Corporal Martinez," Valdris said, her voice carefully neutral. "What do you know of galactic politics?" Jake shrugged. "I know the hegemony controls about 60% of known space, the Free Worlds Alliance controls 30%, and the rest is anybody's guess. I know there's been some kind of power struggle in the Sanguis courts lately. Bunch of vampire-like species fighting over territory. And I know that Earth is still considered a backwater planet by most of the galaxy, which suits us just fine." "Indeed," Valdris murmured. "And if you discovered that the recent reorganization of the Sanguis courts had resulted in new leadership, what would your reaction be?" "Depends on the leadership," Jake said honestly. "The previous Sanguis Empress was a real piece of work. Heard she used to feed prisoners to her pet monsters for entertainment. If someone better took over, that'd be good news for everyone." Valdris's eyes flashed with something that might have been amusement. "You have an interesting perspective on galactic affairs, Corporal." "Ma'am, with all due respect, I'm just a soldier." I point my weapon where they tell me to point it, and I try to make sure the good guys win. Politics is above my pay grade. At that moment, Jake's comm crackled to life. All Earth forces, this is Admiral Chen. Be advised, we're receiving priority transmissions from across the galaxy. The Sanguis courts have a new empress. Repeat, the vampire courts have unified under new leadership. All diplomatic protocols are now in effect. Jake looked at Valdris, who was watching him with an expression that seemed caught between amusement and something deeper. Guess that reorganization you mentioned just became official, he said. So it would seem, Valdris replied softly. Well, congratulations to whoever the new empress is, Jake said, checking his weapon and preparing to move out. Hope she's better than the last one. The galaxy could use some decent leadership for a change. You truly mean that? Valdris observed. It wasn't a question. Course I do. Look, ma'am, I've seen what happens when people in power forget that they're supposed to serve something bigger than themselves. Whether it's a planetary governor or a galactic empress, good leadership makes all the difference. Jake paused, then added with characteristic human bluntness. Plus, anybody who can fight like you did back there has my respect, no matter what species they are or what fancy title they might have. Valdris was quiet for a long moment, her crimson eyes studying Jake's face as if memorizing every detail. When she finally spoke, her voice carried an odd note of wonder. Corporal Martinez, you may have just changed the course of galactic history. Jake laughed. Me? I'm just a grunt from Earth, ma'am. I think you're giving me way too much credit. As alarms began blaring throughout the station, signaling the arrival of what Jake assumed were reinforcements, Valdris smiled, a genuine expression, this time, not the predatory grin he'd seen earlier. Perhaps, she said, or perhaps humans understand something about respect and equality that the rest of the galaxy has forgotten. As rescue ships began docking with the station, neither Jake nor Valdris spoke about the fist bump that had just redefined the relationship between Earth and the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Jake because he didn't understand its significance, and Valdris because she was still processing the fact that a human soldier had just treated the new Galactic Empress like an equal warrior and meant it completely. The galaxy would never be quite the same,